This is the Lockpicker 1969, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to the next episode of Interview with a Lockpicker. Today's guest is Eschlenz. Say hi.
Hello.
Now, I pronounced your name right, correct?
It's actually Eschlenz, so it's
Oh, okay. Well,
Eric Schlenz, Eschlenz.
anybody else who would have been confused the same way is now made clear.
Yeah, you're not the first.
Okay. Where are you from?
From Colorado, kind of the Boulder, Denver area.
Okay. So, and when did you get into lock sport?
I got into lock sport probably about 9 years ago. It was one of those situations where I was just watching interesting stuff on YouTube and probably came across a Bosnian Bill or lock picking lawyer video. And it was something that, always in the back of my mind, I had an interest in. Of course, everybody watches movies where somebody picks a lock, and usually it's misrepresented how that's done, but still the concept that you could do that was pretty cool to me. So then to see somebody who was actually showing how to do it, yeah, I was hooked right away.
Okay. So, wait, sorry, maybe I didn't catch it. How many years ago was that?
About 9 years ago.
9 years ago. Okay. Um, so you mentioned about getting into it and then actually coming back to it a year and a half ago. What brought you back?
Yeah, what brought me back was just random circumstance. I think I was killing time at lunch at work and, scrolling through one of my news feeds and somehow came across, LPU's Reddit subreddit page and discovered that there was this whole organized belt ranking system,
Mm-hmm.
which was really kind of something I think I was in need of, because it opened my eyes to this whole other world of locks that I wasn't super familiar with. All these locks from Sweden, other parts of Europe,
Yeah.
but more specifically that structure, like that a community put the time in to say these are the locks that represent a certain level of difficulty, and if you can demonstrate that you can pick them, then you have a way to progress forward until black belt, which of course I wanted to get a black belt as soon as I learned that the system existed. So yeah, it was kind of random circumstance. I just kind of stumbled across LPU on Reddit, and that reignited my interest.
Okay. Now, normally I get into, your journey, pursuing your belts, but I think I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit and then we'll kind of come back. But
Sure.
you, so you're currently a black belt, correct? What Dan
Yes.
are
Yep.
you?
First Dan.
First Dan. Okay. So can you talk about your journey through that whole thing?
Yeah. I Since I already had a little bit of experience and I really wanted to challenge myself, I tried to jump into the belt ranking system by picking way harder locks than I needed to. So, for example, for my green belt, I picked a Medico Duracam, which I think is a brown belt, if I remember correctly. And I kind of just kept doing that. And the goal that I set out for myself, excuse me, was to pick six black belts eventually, black belt locks. That seems like the biggest challenge I could set for myself, as opposed to doing two black belt locks and then some of these other side quests, which, if I'm honest, I didn't have very much interest in.
Okay.
But that was kind of the general trend. Yeah, I picked a brown belt lock for my green belt. Um, purple belt, I picked a Medical M3 and a Smart Key. So nothing crazy there. Brown belt was where I actually decided I'm going to try to pick my first black belt lock. So I picked the EVA ICS as my first black belt lock, and man, was that a wake up call into this whole other tier of difficulty. I had to make my own tool for it. If I'm honest, I don't think I picked it very well, meaning there wasn't much finesse to it. There was quite a bit of brute force in getting that lock picked, but I got it picked on camera, ungutted. And the other thing with picking those higher ranked locks ahead of time was that when it came to, like, getting my red belt, I had already picked EVA ICS for my brown belt, and so I was able to sort of reuse previous lock picking sessions and recorded videos to advance further without
Ah,
spending too
okay.
much time on a ton of locks.
Gotcha.
And so yeah, red belt, it was EVA ICS and the ASA Twin 6000 gins, which I love picking that lock, by the way. And you'll notice that those are both black belt locks that I did for my red belt.
Okay.
And so when it came time to actually doing the black belt, I already had two black belt locks under my belt, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And so um, the ASAs were, I don't know, they stood out to me as like very special, very unique. And so I really kind of went deep into the rabbit hole of picking black belt ASA locks. And so, aside from the 6,000 gins, I did the 6,000 barrels, which was a huge, huge challenge. I did the ASA Twin V10 with gins. And actually, that one I have the speed pick record. And then I did the multi-lock MT5 Plus, which that got me five of those locks picked. And that's when I hit that wall that, I've told you about.
Yeah, at red belt.
Yep.
Okay. What got you past that?
What got me past it was basically taking another look at the requirements of getting your black belt and realizing that there were some other criteria that I perhaps met. I wasn't sure of this, but the specific one I'm thinking of was community involvement.
Mhm.
And, during that whole hiatus from actually trying to progress with my belt, I was still involved in the community by making and selling 3D printed tools for
Mhm.
the sport. So
Yeah, yeah.
once I came across that requirement, I thought, hey, what the heck? Like, I will get a sixth black belt lock under my belt at some point. But for now, it seems like I maybe meet the criteria. Why don't I just go ahead and apply and see what happens?
Yep, definitely. So, at some point in blue belt, you created a challenge lock. What was that like for you, and how did it influence you in regard to picking or making challenge locks beyond that requirement?
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to work with my hands to break out my Dremel tool. I have to admit I was quite frustrated with the process because I'm not the type of person who has very fine motor skills and is very patient when it comes to making things physically with my hands. So yeah, I really just kind of was anxious to get to the finished product. But um, you know, it was interesting, like getting my hands on tools that I needed for making the pins. I said the Dremel tool. I stuck a piece of brass rod in there and used like a hacksaw blade and
Yep.
did my best to emulate. These guys are really good at it, like DMAC, and
Mhm.
trying to cut serrations in and create interesting features of it. And then I really wanted to do something to the plug as well. So, I tried to do some undercuts with a specific Dremel bit. And I gotta say, like, it was a lesson in how not to do a challenge lock more than it was to do a challenge lock. But in the end, I got there, I got it done. It was functional. It was something I thought was worthy enough of saying I completed that part of the journey. Um, but yeah, it was challenging for me. Again, I'm not super good with hand tools.
Okay. So, when you were learning lockpicking, though, other than hitting your that wall at red belt in that pursuit, what were some of the other challenges that you faced learning?
I think the biggest one, I probably share this with many, many people, was what they call the jiggle test, really understanding what that means,
Yeah.
but also understanding how much tension needs to vary from lock to lock.
Okay. So,
I
go ahead.
for example, American lock was my first big challenge. Up until that point, obviously, I was picking master locks and clear acrylic locks, and you could go ham on the tension. And so that just kind of became the precedent for me for how much tension to use.
Gotcha.
And suddenly, when I got to American lock, it's like, oh no, when they say light tension, they mean like you're barely holding the tension wrench in place.
Okay. Yeah. I went through something similar, so I can relate. So, as you were getting into lock sport and lock picking, who were some of your influencers other than Bosnian Bill on YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, lockpicking lawyer, of course, and lock noob, definitely. And those, as far as I knew at that point in time, before I discovered LPU, that was the world of lockpicking on YouTube.
Yeah.
I really had no knowledge of all of these amazing pickers that were creating fantastic videos out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a bunch of them out there today that create amazing content. So
Yeah,
it's changed very much. And I got into it almost 4 years ago now. So yeah, definitely changed a lot. Um,
yeah, yeah.
Speaking of the community, how were you introduced to it? How did you, kind of get into it? Because you have a unique story and how it applies to you.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on when we're talking about. Like I said, for my first entry into, I guess, quote unquote, the community, and I'm not referring to LPU specifically, I'm referring to just lockpicking. It was me watching YouTube videos. That was the primary way I got into it. But in terms of discovering LPU, um, I mean, like I said, it really wasn't anything more than just kind of stumbling across it and realizing that this community had done something really interesting in creating a formula, a journey path for honing your skills
Yes.
and getting better. And I think that that almost more than anything really drew me to the community because that was a sign from the get-go that it was very well organized, which I have to say for online hobby communities is
Yeah,
kind of rare.
exactly. Okay. So you got your business going though, 44 Delta, because of the community, correct?
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah. So the kind of the origin story there is that 3D printing was something I was already way into, and I noticed right away that there were some 3D printing channels on LPU and other lock picking Discord servers. So I immediately jumped into those and just started having conversations with people. And I was aware that there were a lot of tools available on Thingiverse or on printables. And somebody reached out to me pretty early on. They're like, "Hey, I'm over in Sweden, and there are all these 3D printable tools that I would like to have. And on top of that, I have an idea for a pick handle that I'd like to design. Would you be interested in helping me with that?" And so it's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, I get to mix my hobbies, lockpicking and 3D printing.
Hmm.
And so, I went ahead and printed a bunch of the stuff he wanted and tried to help him make some handles for a pick and sent him off. And that kind of resulted in him displaying what he had. And then all of a sudden, a couple more people are coming forward. They're like, "Hey, if I give you a couple bucks, would you print X, Y, and Z for me?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And so that kept happening for a couple months, and I started to pick up on a trend of what people were interested in. And I'm very respectful of licensing, the licenses chosen
Yeah.
for people's designs. And so it was at that point in time I said, okay, like I'm people are giving me cash in exchange for this. It's fun for me to do this. Maybe I'll just go ahead and stock up ahead of time on some of these tools so that I could offer them up in a similar fashion to what like AMV Garrett does with his locks, or some of these other people like Yagias, where they've got spreadsheets of their stock and they post it in the LPU Bazaar.
Hmm.
And so I just started doing that, and people just kept coming forward, and so it kind of just grew and grew and grew. Um, but it grew to the point where the spreadsheet is not a great mechanism for somebody who's trying to look through inventory and figure out like what they can order and how much it is.
Yeah.
So, eventually it got to the point where I had enough time on my hands that I could spin up 44delta.com as
Yep.
an official business and have a better experience for
A,
people looking for this stuff.
a better commerce experience. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It was
Question.
less frustrating for me too, by the way.
Okay. Question for you. So on one of your, you have two YouTube channels. One is your, I'm assuming your original, Eschlenz, and then the other one's your at 44 Delta Inc. Um,
Yep.
on your first channel though, I noticed the Audible agent. What does that mean? What is that in reference to?
Yeah, it's silly. So, I have many, many hobbies, and one of the first hobbies I got really into in my late teens and early 20s was like DJing, mixing. I was huge into the electronic music scene, and I loved the idea of having vinyl turntables and a mixer and just trying to see if I could beat match and mix songs together and create a set, something that I could give to my friends who had a similar interest in the same music.
Mm-hmm.
And before long, I was doing some house parties for friends and stuff. And my buddy, I think we were driving back from Denver one night, and he's like, you need to pick a DJ name. Like every DJ has a name. And so we were just spitballing, and I think I said something like, it'd be cool if it had the word like agent in it, or, suggested like, yeah, espionage or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, well, okay, what about audible agent? And I don't know, it stuck
It's
right
stuck.
away. It
Yeah.
just, yeah, it was kind of, it rolls off the tongue easily, and it was just kind of unique. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go with that. And that kind of became my moniker for all things online. So, gaming, I was a really big, Counter-Strike source gamer for a long time. And
Okay.
um, it just stuck. That is, my moniker.
Yep.
So
No,
that's the story.
I understand that one. So, in talking about your YouTube channel now, what was the original reason for your channel, and what do you, because you obviously developed into a second channel for your business. What are the
hmm
futures of your channels going forward?
Yeah. So the original purpose of my first channel was, I think, just to kind of document somewhat for myself, but also for my friends, some of the things I was doing with different hobbies, and you know, eh, I felt like it was interesting content for, at the very least, me to go back years from now and rewatch. And so it was kind of aimless. I didn't really have any kind of a goal. And then when I rediscovered lock picking, obviously I needed to represent my picking sessions for belts a certain way. So YouTube was the go-to for that. And it suddenly became just about lock picking. So it was kind of during my journey, I decided I would try to do something that I hadn't seen done a lot on YouTube, which was really go deep into what is happening both with my hands and in my mind when I'm picking a particularly difficult lock.
Hmm. Yep.
I really wanted to try to get that information out, because for me it was really, really hard to scrape that information from a lot of the videos I was seeing.
Exactly.
And so that, and then of course 44 Delta became more and more in the picture. So I still had that YouTube channel. I was like, okay, I'll maybe on occasion mention something I'm doing with 44 Delta. But ultimately, I didn't want that primary channel to be about 44 Delta. I wanted to continue to be about, just lock picking or my other hobbies. And so that was why I spun up the 44 Delta YouTube channel, was just to have kind of an outlet to do things like assembly videos on
Okay.
items I sell, or just
Sure.
talk about new products. So yeah, I mean, I think the future of the 44 Delta YouTube channel is just going to be kind of business related stuff, just kind of like giving updates on what's going on with the the business. But my personal channel, it'll probably still be mostly lock picking, if I get the time to make any more videos.
Hmm.
But outside of that, I'm not afraid to go back to another hobby and make videos about that and put them on that channel.
Well, I definitely wanted to get into and talk about some of your hobbies a little bit, but first, a story about you that I absolutely love. What do you do for a living?
I am currently retired. I was a software engineer for about 26 years.
And how old are you? Do you mind me asking?
No, I
Rough,
am 45.
roughly. Okay. Retired
45.
at 45. I am totally jealous. So my hat's off to you if you can do that kind of thing and enjoy your life and enjoy your hobbies, definitely. So let's get into that.
Sure.
With obviously your 3D printing business started as just a hobby. So how did 3D printing really get started with you?
Yeah, it was yeah, I've seen these printers come out and more of these websites that, TechCrunch and other tech related websites were talking about these things. And I saw 3D printing as both something I felt like would be fun to just tinker with. I was also interested in the fact that you could build them from a kit. But more than that, I had always had an interest in doing CAD. And CAD design seemed like it was going to go hand in hand with that. Like if I was ever
Yep.
going to learn CAD, having a 3D printer gave me a really, really good
Good reason.
reason to
Yeah.
get in, yeah, to get into CAD.
Yep.
And so, um, yeah, I think I did what everybody does when they first get a 3D printer. You get on Thingiverse and printables, and you just start making stuff because the novelty of being able to do that is
Yep.
so new. But it was not long after that that I said, okay, like that novelty is going to wear off pretty quickly. It's time to start learning about CAD. And so, I just watched tons of YouTube videos on doing really basic CAD projects. And so I'm the type of person that like I will do a little bit of research up front to learn about something. I'll then apply what I learn, and that generates a bunch of new questions. And so I'll go back to the research mode, and it's kind of this cycle of learning. But you also, at least for me, I need a project of some kind to really help drive that progress forward. And
Sure.
so, my wife was coming up with ideas for things around the house that I could do. And I was like, yeah, great, that's a project. I'm gonna get right on it and just practice these skills and try to get better with it. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of aspects of 3D printing I really like. It's a mix of building things from kits and the CAD design and seeing your creations come to life.
Well, it's not much of a jump though from 3D printing into CNC and laser cutting, right?
No, no, that's one of the things I like about the hobbies I have is there is a lot of overlap.
Yep.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. 3D printer G code is the language
Yep.
that they use to process and run their instructions. Same thing with my CNC machine. Um, there's a lot of overlap there, and so getting familiar with these software packages that either use Cartesian coordinates to lay things out ahead of time, or are three-dimensional. it, I felt like I had a leg up on those. So yeah, you're right, they are pretty easy to transition to.
So, okay, so I'm going to transition to yet another of your hobbies, and I would imagine that for RC cars and your quadcopters, that you're able to print parts and stuff for those too.
Yeah, yeah, I've designed parts for my own RC cars and um, upgraded them essentially to make them do what I want them to.
Mhm. Okay, and then,
Yeah,
well,
if you want details, like, I've got this Traxxas XRT, which is just a beast of a vehicle on its own, and I upgraded the ESC on that, and all of the suspensions upgraded on it and everything. And that ESC, it didn't have a way to mount to the chassis, and so it's pretty easy to design something in CAD real quick to adapt it and mount it to the chassis. So that thing is just so overpowered. It's almost no fun to drive anymore because you punch the gas and it's practically doing a backflip.
it's got that much torque going on. Huh?
Yeah, it's got a lot.
Okay, so transitioning from your hobby of RC cars, let's talk about real cars because That's something you and I have
Yeah.
in common there. Um, what has that been for you?
Yeah, I got into that super early as well. I think it was basically with the first car I ever bought for myself. I don't know, I was really into like the Japanese market cars, even though I had an American car. My first one was a Ford Escort GT, but I really liked what I was seeing both in real life on the road, but also in those magazines that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And so I did horrible, horrible things to that Escort in terms of, styling and modifications. I was basically like the AutoZone special of upgrades,
Oh
that
god,
car.
oh god.
Um, and, yeah, looking back on it, I cringe, but, it was fun. And then, I got a Mustang Cobra. It's a 1995 Cobra. I think
Nice.
I don't know, it was probably like 20 or something like that. And, yeah, it was so powerful from the get-go, but that wasn't enough. I was like, "I wanna supercharge this. I wanna do all the things."
Of
And so
course.
that did eventually happen. I supercharged it, and at the same time, like I was really willing to get my hands literally dirty by working on it. Oil changes, um, air filter, switching to cold air
Yep,
intake.
yep.
I just wanted to learn more about the mechanical nature of cars. And so, yeah, that Mustang was super fun to work on. Again, I probably did some horrible things to it, not understanding basics of, how you torque things down and, using the right tool for the job. But it was a good learning experience. And, I kept that car for quite a while. I did ultimately end up getting a 2013 WRX STI. And that one I still have it. It is super heavily modified. It's got a Cobb 20G turbo. It does 390 wheel horsepower, 410 foot-pounds of torque. I've
Nice.
done pretty much everything you can think to do on that car outside of doing an engine swap. And both the Mustang and the STI, I've taken to the tracks. I never took the Mustang onto like a circuit track because that would have been scary as hell, but did a lot of quarter mile runs in it for fun. And same thing with the STI, Bandimere. Unfortunately, Bandimere is now closed, but that was my go-to. We'd have Subaru meetups there and just have a blast running it down the quarter mile every day.
Oh,
And so yeah, I feel very comfortable around cars now,
yeah.
and it's still an interest to me. But I do see where things are heading, unfortunately. I think
Yeah.
the
That's
the
that's
death of
why
the petrol engine is
that
coming.
that and quite frankly, the community around cars has
Yeah,
more moved to definitely very immature people in my opinion, and it
yeah,
definitely made me want to get out of it. It was just getting too risky with some of the things that some of these folks would do at car meets and at races. But yeah,
yeah. Kind of they're ruining it, making it unsafe, unfortunately.
but
But
uh,
on top of that, that I gotta say, like the EPA has been pretty heavy-handed too
yeah,
on emission stuff, and that's really impacted what you can do with upgrades. Like Cobb was a big name in Subaru and other um, manufacturers of vehicles, and they've had to jump through major hoops to get their stuff carb certified. And it's very easy for you to do a simple modification, swap out your catalytic converter for a high efficiency one and suddenly not
yeah,
be carb compliant
yeah.
and fail emissions checks. So that's also kind of put a damper on spirits. I don't know. There are a couple reasons why it's kind of fallen by the wayside for me.
Today's cars, even a gas pedal's not a gas pedal anymore. It's a switch. So I mean,
Yeah.
so you have to program your gas pedal now in order to do something different with it, which kind of,
Yeah.
frankly, is kind of silly. But anyway, um, so I wanted to make sure we took the time for you to be able to give any thank yous to other lock sporters that you wanted to give.
Yeah. Let's see. Um, I know there's a bit of controversy around certain people in the community, but to me, I still owe thanks to Bosnian Bill and Lockpicking Lawyer because I really do feel like without their videos, I probably wouldn't have gained this interest in lockpicking.
True.
Um, but outside of that, specifically within the community I've been directly involved in, there are a few standouts. White, who really helped me with ASA locks and helped me get over that hurdle at red belt and getting to my black belt. He was very, very, very helpful. And just so like forthcoming with information. So huge thanks to him. Artichoke, who I think has some amazing videos, like
Yes.
really detailed, up close
Very. Yeah.
videos of what's happening in the lock. I think those are fantastic, and I hope to see more of those. And then outside that, Michael Gilchrist, I think his videos are also fantastic for really talking through exactly what he's feeling, what he's looking for. I felt like I was able to sort of step into his shoes when I was watching his videos and gain a better understanding of what the feedback was telling me.
Hmm. Okay. So I guess this is the last question before we wrap up. What is your favorite thing
Okay.
about lock sport?
Yeah, I think just the challenge of it, the requirement of having really fine motor skills, but also the portability of it. You know, it's one of those things that you can just sit there, watch a movie with your wife or significant other, and just pick locks or bring it with you in your
Yeah,
car. And if you're just hanging out there, pick a couple locks. The portability of it, I think, is one of the big ones. But outside of that, it's a fun challenge. It is a puzzle, and it requires you to really hone your skills.
okay. Do you have a final message you'd like to give to our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just I guess a little bit of advice from me. When you feel like you've suddenly hit a wall, which everybody does from time to time, my suggestion is to go back to your fundamentals because, at least for me, that is usually what is lacking. So often it's the case that I get stuck on a lock and I realize, oh, I'm completely forgetting those simple fundamentals. And then outside of that, when you get stuck on a lock, watch as many videos as you can on how to pick that specific lock because
Yeah,
there's more ways than one to do it, and you'll glean a lot of information from watching others pick it.
definitely. I want to thank you for doing this interview. It's been fun. I especially enjoyed in the pre interview being to talk able to talk through so many different common interests and hobbies, especially. That was a lot of fun for me. I thank you. Um,
Yeah, thank you.
so I'm gonna just for our listeners' sake, so they understand the in the description for this video, your I'm gonna link both of his YouTube channels so you can find them both. Um, I encourage you if you have not been interviewed yet, or if it's been a really long time since you did an initial interview, well, circle back. Let's do another one. Or if you haven't been interviewed yet, let's get that one done and let the community know who you are and what you're about and what you're interested in besides Locksport. So, with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. If you are a subscriber, thank you. If you are not yet a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications and all, and hit like on the video. And thanks for listening.